Hi, I'm Amita. Welcome to my writing blog. I'm going to be talking to you about various things to do with writing. I will talk about your writing process, staying motivated as a writer, and also some insider tips about the writing industry. So come along with me on this journey. I'm just going to introduce myself first, and then today we're going to talk about the 3 factors that I think determine whether you're going to be successful as a writer or not. So just stay tuned for those 3 tips. I'm going to first of all just introduce myself quickly so you know who I am. I write in a couple of different genres because I get bored writing in just one. So you might know my Regency series. It's the Unladylike Regency series, as I like to call it. And it's about the Marley sisters, who are daughters of an East India Company Earl and his Indian mistress. And the first of those books is Unladylike Lessons in Love, which I just showed you, the American cover and the English cover. And this is the second in the series. It's, as you can see, the English cover and the American cover, they're quite different. You might like one or you might like the other. They are about Anya Marley, who's the second sister. The first one was Leela. And Anya Marley is a sitar player and a singer in Queen Charlotte's court in the early 1800s in London. The third book, An Unladylike Secret, which is about Mira Marley, who's a writer, will come out in 2025. I also write a contemporary mystery series about a neurodiverse amateur sleuth professional baker of macabre cakes. And her name is Aria Winters, and she is one of my absolute favourite characters that I've ever written. I think probably the most like me. This series used to be published by Polis Books, who closed their doors recently. So this is going to be out on submission, and I will tell you more about it as the journey unfolds. My Regency series that I just told you about is published with HarperCollins. I also write, I can't stop writing. It is one of those things that I have to almost continuously do. So I do write articles, and so you might see some of my articles in Red magazine or The New Scientist, The Big Issue, Writer's Digest, Diva magazine recently, and crime reads as well. So you might see my name in sometimes writing feature articles. I also write short stories, so again you might see various short stories kind of sprinkled around the place. I have won a couple of different awards, including the Exeter Novel Prize and the SI Leeds Literary Prize. Okay, so what are the 3 factors that determine whether you're going to be successful as a writer or not? Let's talk about that. It is connected to my next post as well, which is going to be all about why do you write? Like what is your reason for writing? So we will come to that in my next post. In this post are the 3 reasons. Okay, the first reason is actually the least important one. Okay, we're going to start with the least important one, and that's talent. Now, you might want talent to be the most important one, and you might think, actually, I've got the talent, and so I will find success. Unfortunately, that is not true about any arts industry. And maybe it's not true about other jobs as well. I really don't know. But I think in the arts, talent is a small part of whether you will be successful in a kind of a traditional sense of success or not. So if you think about talent, it is really just an aptitude, right? You might think other people may have told you when you write that your turn of phrase is really interesting, or you've got a really poetic or lyrical way of writing, or you write very clearly and it's very compelling or persuasive. So you might hear these things if you're lucky. You might also, of course, not be so lucky, and people might tell you, don't bother writing. Really, it's a really difficult industry. You'll never make it as a writer. So few people do. You might hear those messages. You might also be told that someone like you can't ever be a writer because you aren't the right skin color or the right accent, or your grammar isn't correct, or they might also say things like things about not just your race, but also your class, your sexuality, your identity, and many different things. People like you don't make it in this industry. You might hear. So if you're lucky, you might be told you're a really good writer. Now that's talent. That might be ability, aptitude, interest. Now the thing that talent does is it starts you on the journey. So where you've got a little bit of an idea that you're good at something, or just that you really love doing it and you can spend hours doing it, that might just start you on the journey, and it might make you think, actually, this might be a good career path for me, or a strong kind of hobby that I want to be, that I want to pursue. So that's the first factor. Talent obviously isn't really in your hands. It's something that, it might be genetic, or might be something that you've learned when you're growing up. The second factor is in your hands, but it's quite hard. And the second factor is actually tenacity. I want to talk about that a little bit. See, the writing industry and any arts industry cannot guarantee you success. Not only can't it guarantee you success, it can't even guarantee you an income. It can't guarantee that you'll earn a living from it. It can't guarantee that it will pay you or publish you. So there are no guarantees. So anyone, I can tell you this, that anyone who tells you that, I'm going to help you write the next bestseller, they're not telling the truth, because nobody can guarantee that. So what can you do about that? What this means is that many times in your journey, in fact, all of your life as a writer or as an artist, you will experience what you think of as failure. Failure, I think, is actually a really, really important part of the creative process, but we'll talk about that another time. Today, I just want to say that rejection is a huge part of a writer's life. You will be rejected at every part of your journey. That doesn't mean that you will exclusively only be rejected, obviously. It just means that rejection will keep on coming back. This can mean that you've written something, you've sent it out, and someone hasn't got back to you, or when they do get back, they tell you, sorry, but this isn't right for us. So that's a rejection. And it can be for a story, it can be for a novel. It can be by an agent, it can be by a publisher, it can be subsequent to that. When you've already published, you might not get a good advance, or you've got a good advance, you might not get sales. That might impact the next book. So rejection is a part of the journey, and the more you accept that it is part of the journey, the easier, in a sense, it's going to be, because what you then need, the quality that you need, is tenacity. You need to kind of get back up again, and you need to try again if writing is in fact important to you. I'll give an example in sports, okay? One athlete that I really admire and who I've watched over the years is Andy Murray. He's a tennis player, and he's won many titles, and his journey has been just immense, because he started off not someone who was just absolutely winning or smashing everything that he tried, but you can see that there's been an upward curve to his journey where he had to really dig deep in order to get those big wins, and he was able to do that. Not everyone is. So he's a hugely respected man in that sense. What I wanted to say about him is that if you're a fan of his, if you've ever watched a match of his, it can be so heartbreaking and frustrating watching him play, because he's the kind of person, he holds his emotions in, but I think he's actually quite strongly impacted by his emotions, because you might see him, one thing goes wrong in a match, and then the rest of the match might collapse for him. So that's something that he's really had to work hard to overcome. And I want to say it's the same with writing, that there are athletes who, when one thing goes wrong, it stays in their head and it sticks there as failure, and then they can't necessarily easily get back up again. Whereas there are other athletes who they have something, they have a setback, and they forget about it, and they put it away, and they continue as if that setback has no impact on their future. That's tenacity. Tenacity is when you have selective amnesia almost about failure, and you say, well, what has failed in the past actually has no impact on my future. My future chances are not affected by it. That's selective amnesia. So I want you to think about that, and how when you are going to face those inevitable rejections and failures and setbacks, how are you going to put them aside, learn from them, sure, but then put them aside and move on and do the next thing, and remember that the next thing is not necessarily impacted by the setback that you've had. So that's the second thing, and that's tenacity, and that is in your hands. The third factor is not in your hands, it's the market. You might say, Amita, I can work with the market, I can understand, I know what the trends are doing. Okay, this is how publishing works. I'll tell you. So if you say that, actually, what is really selling very well is romantasy at the moment. or we had a trend of women going missing, and those were the trend for a while. Sometimes you might have thrillers being the kind of the political thrillers being the most recent trend. It's possible. Those things that you think are a trend, and if you write towards them, that thing that you write won't be published for another couple of years. That's how slow publishing works. So by the time that you've actually published something, that trend is long gone. I want you to think about that and keep that in mind. So working to the market is actually a very, very dangerous and very difficult thing to do, because you are always lagging behind the market and trends if you try and do that. The biggest successes in publishing actually come from people who don't worry about trends. So if you look at Harry Potter, $1 billion+ dollar franchise that it is, the success is, if you look back at it, the very first time that J.K. Rowling got a publishing contract, she got £1,500 advance for it, which is nothing compared to what she's then subsequently earned from it. It was because at that time people thought, well, nobody's going to buy, and something about a child wizard, like that doesn't sell anymore. That's not the trend. So working to trends is not necessarily the best idea. This means that the market is fickle. You don't know where it's going to go next. You might be a good predictor. You might have a marketing background for all I know, and you might be able to understand trends. But what I want to caution you about is that a large part of your success, like traditional success, where you sell loads and you get awards, all of that, is determined by market trends and whether a publisher decides that you are part of that trend or not, and whether they hype you or not. So those are the three factors. So just to repeat the three factors that influence success, a small part is talent, two big parts, one is your tenacity, and the third is market trends that you cannot control. If you think about it like this, you can certainly control your tenacity, but you can't control whether you get successful or not, right? So you can work at it. This is why it's really important to do the next thing, which we're going to talk about in the next post, which is to understand why you write. Subscribe, follow, like my posts, and then I will be able to keep on giving you this content. And don't forget to check out my next post, which is about why the hell do you write?